So how did you decide that you wanted to put grit access control into your shop?
So this is actually, this was a pretty great opportunity for me because I came into this space before there was a shop here.
Yeah.
When I was hired on, they'd already purchased some of the major equipment, but like there wasn't a wrench in the building, there wasn't a screwdriver. So there was a lot of building out that needed to be done, and it had never been opened before. So there weren't any pre-existing expectations or like any like cultural baggage to deal with. But when I came in, I looked through the spaces, I realized we're in multiple separate rooms. We've got a lot of like wild variety of tool sets and a lot of hazards. So there's a lot of things here that I was really concerned about, and I'm not going to be here every hour that this is open. We're geared towards students, so we want to be open when they're not in class, which means it's not business hours. So we're open until 10 p.m. pretty much every night. And I knew we would have to have some sort of mechanism to give us accountability. Some way that I can know that people using these tools are trained, they've gone through our process, and they have our permission to use these tools. And then also some amount of accountability for me to look at after the fact, like if there is an incident, I need to know who was involved, who was there, who was operating the machine. Mm-hmm. And I work on a college campus. Anybody else who's been part of a governmental job like that knows that there's a lot of hoops to jump through to bring in any system. So one of the things we had to do is we had to look for what product we wanted and then any comparable products. We have to provide, here's a list of 3 options, and I have to justify why I picked the one that I did. And when I was doing search for comparables, I mean, there really kind of aren't. There's some similar things, but they don't do all the things that Grit does. And they're much more DIY in their nature, so they require you to be your own tech support. And if anything goes wrong, there isn't that background of information, there isn't that wealth of information of other users that I could go and tap into.
Sure.
So that became kind of a no-brainer. And then on top of that, the fact that with Grit, I buy the equipment and it's ours. With so many, with one of the other systems I was looking at, because they're based on your number of members in the space, and they charge per user, we would have been paying for an entire Grit system in one semester just because we see so much foot traffic coming through the space. So yeah, that has been absolutely fantastic.
Awesome. Did you have to like write up proposals for the justification of why you wanted it?
I mean,
or you were able to just say, I want this?
The nice thing about presenting a system that is very clearly going to make tools more safe, because you are making sure people are going through your training process, most of the time people are understanding of that. I'm not trying to convince them that I want like a $10,000 new toy to play with. It's, hey, here's a system that is going to make sure that everybody's following our policies and that we are covering ourselves from a liability standpoint, because we've done our due diligence, we've trained that user, we can point to the specific documentation on what we communicated to them so that we told them you can be safe with this tool if you do these steps. And now we have it all documented and shown in the system that, yep, they went through that process. They knew how to use it safely. And if something bad happened, it was misuse. It wasn't because we didn't show them.
And that functionality of having creating a waiver, and then when someone signs in for the first time, there's actually a signature form that they sign, and it's stored on their user profile.
Yeah,
it's helping to ensure students aren't jumping around doing things that they've not been trained.
We also have some ability to just protect our own investment on these machines. So we had a user who, they'd gone through our training process. They understood how to use the machine safely from a perspective of, not cutting their fingers. But I was able to notice like, hey, we've had our bandsaw break 3 nights in a row. And when I looked through the data, it's the same user every time. So I was able to reach out to them and ask, what are you doing when this is happening? And they were able to say, well, I'm cutting this out of this large block. And it turns out that they were just trying to cut way too tight of a radius on way too thick of a piece of material with the blade that we had there. So they're using a 3/8 inch blade and trying to make a really sharp radius turn. It just doesn't work, and it bends and breaks the blade. So in that case, because I was able to get his information right out of the system, it was a simple conversation. And that one, we didn't have to go punitive with it. It was just that conversation of like, hey, thanks for being safe and not hurting yourself but also please report these issues to us. In the future, here's a chart on how to make radius cuts with different blades that are available.
Sure. Sometimes you need some retraining.
Yeah, but there have been cases where we had just somewhat more malicious misuse. People who are trying to abuse our systems or get away with things. And in those, unfortunately, we have had to use some aspects of the system to revoke status.
Sure.
So, because it's a rotating group of staff workers here, we found that if I were to just remove permissions, somebody could come up to the front desk and say, but I used to be able to use that tool yesterday. And if there was a staff member working who's like, oh yeah, I did that training for you, they might think that this was just a glitch or an accident, and they'd reinstate that. But now that there's a revoked status, instead of it looking like, oh, this just disappeared, it's very clearly like, no, this was there, explicit. But it's been explicitly removed.
Yeah.
So now we know, okay, this person probably needs to have a conversation with the shop manager to discuss what they were doing. Aside from just access control, we've also found it really handy to use in some situations where there's a machine that's out of order. We can, aside from doing your traditional lockout, tagout, plug locks or locking an interlock like we have on some of our more powerful pieces of equipment, we can also lock things out through grit when things are down for maintenance. This allows us to leave things connected before we're actually getting in and doing the maintenance, but we know that a guest's not going to walk up and use a tool while we're waiting for a blade change. Sure. So this means that for my student staff, if they notice, hey, the blade on the miter saw has gotten dull, rather than having to go through and disconnect things or start to take things out from the wall, they can just lock it out in grit and send me a note, and now I know, hey, I'm going to go and do that work tomorrow.
And but when it's locked out, no matter who you are,
nobody's going to power it up.
Can't be powered
when it's in that state.
Sure. I'd love to know how you use the reporting and the data that comes out of the system.
Yeah, so I mean, through the reports function, I'm able to get a lot of data that's really helpful for me in end of semester, end of year reporting. Okay. My higher ups all want to know what are the most popular tools. They want to know demographic information about our user base. So we're able to abstract a lot of that information out of the huge volume of data that Grit's obviously storing. Because we have that integration with our university ID cards, I'm able to tie every profile to a specific student. So I know, hey, they're coming from this department. They're studying and getting this major. They're this year in school. And because of that, I can often do some breakdowns of communicating back to campus that, we're seeing this percentage of architecture students coming through and using our space, or we're seeing this number of engineering students coming in using the space, which is really helpful for people to understand the value of the facility, to understand what people are coming in. And then on my end, it's also really helpful to know when we're seeing seasonal trends. We know some big activities like this campus has a massive engineering open house every spring. So I can anticipate that in the weeks leading up to that we're going to be busy. But now that we've been open for a couple of years, I can do reports and I can see, okay, here's our statistical data over multiple years of when we're busy and when we're slow.
Yeah.
And from that, I can start to make guesses on, I bet that there's a final project presentation that a professor always makes due during this time period.
Yeah.
I should probably up my staffing for that week. But this week over here at the very beginning of the semester before things have started, it's always really slow. Sure. Okay, I can cut back a staff member, save a few dollars so that I can redirect it to when we are busy later in the year. When we first opened, I had to just make guesses on those things. But now I can have it be a little bit data driven and be a little smarter about it.